If you've ever felt like your content strategy is good, but still not connecting the dots to revenue, you're gonna wanna hear this one. We sat down with Melissa Zaner, a seasoned strategist and the founder of Organic GTM, to talk through how she's helping startups grow with organic content that actually converts. We covered positioning pipelines, AI, empathy, and yep, even gummy bears. Let's pass the mic. Hey y'all, and welcome to the ClearVoice MIC, short for Marketers in Conversation. I'm Taylor Moon, Director of Content over here at ClearVoice, and today I'm joined by the amazing Melissa Zaner, who is the founder of Organic GTM. So, Melissa, I'll pass the mic to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. I know a bit about you. I follow you on LinkedIn as well, have been following you for a bit. But for those that aren't as familiar, I'd love to kind of pass you the mic and for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. I'm an organic content marketer who helps B2B startups with content strategy and organic lead gen primarily. I was in-house for about 12 years, and now I've been operating as a fractional leader for the last 2.5.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe where you are previously and what was the kind of tipping point where you kind of were like, I'm going to do it on my own, and what led to that path, if you will?
Full disclosure, I oftentimes refer to myself as an escape hatch entrepreneur. So I did not have a grand plan to start a business. I was not mapping it out for 6 months. I was in-house at my last employed job, which was probably the most stressful, draining job I've ever had. And I was lucky enough to have built up some savings, and I just quit. My
Yeah.
last my last day was on a Thursday. I sat down over the weekend and put together a very small pitch deck and some ideas for what I could sell. And I really started out thinking that I knew I had a network. I'd been in the industry a long time. I could at least book some consulting or freelance work to tide myself over while I figured out my next step.
Yeah.
And what happened was inside of a few months, I had booked myself full and essentially replaced my salary. And
Amazing.
so, so at that point, you have to do some introspection and ask yourself if you potentially have a viable business, which
Yeah.
which I thought I did. So I don't recommend that route, by the way. I do recommend people go into it with a plan. I think there was a huge element of luck, but I also think that it served me well doing that 12 years into my career because I had built a really strong network and a lot of the expertise that I needed to just pivot really, really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that kind of where your just fractional branding, if you will, just sparked from there? Yes?
Yes. At the time, so this was October 2022. This was when all of the tech companies were doing mass layoffs. And I have primarily worked in SaaS for most of my career. And then a few weeks after I quit, they officially launched ChatGPT for
Yes.
for mass consumption. So the timing was incredible on my part. I really picked a choice time to try to go out on my own. But my thought process was that a lot of organizations were cutting marketing budgets and cutting headcounts. And when things are volatile, organizations are much more open to using a fractional leader or a contractor than they are to committing to a full-time headcount.
Absolutely.
And that has proven to be true the past few years. And so I think it's just a fantastic way to sort of book work and still be able to do meaningful work. But it also means that I don't have to hustle and wonder where the next dollar is coming from every minute. I didn't want to do something that was a traditional freelancer model. I really wanted to feel like I had MRR. And so this enables me to also plan my finances effectively as well.
You have a good hybrid model, as
Yeah.
I would call
Yeah.
it, which is perfect. And I find it kind of interesting too, obviously different, but our at Clear Voice, it's all about, yes, a freelance model, but kind of providing that fractional support to companies and leaders that, they just don't have the bandwidth. Maybe they don't have the budget for a full like in-house person. I think a lot of people also I mean, you probably, maybe this is part of your pitch too sometimes, but a lot of people get kind of, they forget how much goes into hiring someone, the bandwidth, the time, but also insurance. Like when you think about it, there's a lot of cost that goes into it, where we could probably streamline some things if you hire someone and bring someone on fractionally to lead things like you. So it's 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 an interesting model, and you're absolutely right. I think it kind of kicked off COVID, then leading a little bit up to, and I think we've seen it stick, right? Like this isn't necessarily going away. And for good reason, right? I ramble, but I'd love to hear a little bit more of your input on that too.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a more sophisticated version of the gig economy. So, 5, 10 years ago, everybody realized they could freelance or side hustle or what have you to supplement their income. And that's largely because people are underpaid. So maybe we should just pay people better. I'll throw that out there. But right, people have really, I think, realized the same thing. Nobody wants to be hustling. It is really challenging, especially at a startup, to scale, to bring in marketing hires and to go through that whole process and also come out with a really excellent outcome, especially if the person doing the hiring doesn't have the marketing background. And so fractional, I think, is a very happy medium. To your earlier point, a lot of my clients actually task me with doing the interviewing and hiring process for their marketing resources.
Wow, yeah.
Specifically because they don't have the background and they also don't have the time. Oftentimes the founder is bringing me in and the founder has a million other things to do. So that's an area where I can probably do it a little more efficiently and effectively than they can.
I think any marketer that might be listening to this has been through a process or an interview where they're not being interviewed by someone in the marketing space. So
Yes.
it's the truth, right? We've all been there, I feel like, one way or another.
Yes.
I'd love to jump a little bit into your company ultimately that you founded, Organic GTM. Now, I know this following you. What are your thoughts? I feel like some people, when they hear organic, their brain goes like strictly SEO. Is that something you're constantly kind of like re-educating or combating? What does that look like for you?
Yes, to some extent. I think, I marketed myself as a content person for the bulk of
Yes.
my career. And there's misnomers about content too, right? Everyone just thinks blog or nowadays social media posts. And really, content spans your entire marketing ecosystem. If you're putting
Mm-hmm.
out an asset, it's content, my friends. And so I really started moving away from that language because I was doing all of these other elements past content. I was working on go to market, I was working on strategy, we were, looking at CRO opportunities, all of this, and it did feel more comprehensive. I find that it's really easier to educate people with organic because a lot of people, at least at a high level, understand organic versus paid. And so I essentially tell people that organic really is everything except paid. So
And you're right. Like that's my hot take as well. But
yeah.
I feel like there tends to be this like assumption, and not going to be like it's wrong, but it kind of is.
I don't know that that will ever go away though. Historically, people have always been ill-informed about marketing. And especially in digital marketing, a lot of it is underappreciated. You see these people that are like, well, I can post on social media. Why would I pay you? And it's like, what you're doing and what I'm doing are two wildly different things, right? And so I think that piece of educating people is always going to fall on marketers. And one of the savviest things we can do for our own careers, whether we're in-house or on our own, is learn to educate people about the real strategy and talent and research and thoughtfulness it takes to produce effective marketing. They don't necessarily have to understand it all, but they do have to develop that appreciation and respect for it if they're going to give you the space and grace to do your job well.
Absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you also tend to focus like a little more niche, if you will. Like there's the broad content strategy, go to market, holistic, but you also lean a little bit more heavily into organic lead gen, whereas a lot of people rely pretty heavily on a paid. Like they put a lot of budget toward that, where maybe you could offset and find a happy medium. And I'd love to hear kind of where you came into that, where I'm with you, because content I view it as the fuel. It fuels everything at the end of the day, even paid, if we want to go into it, which we can, but it fuels everything, sales enablement, it's all over the place. So I'd love to hear kind of where you also found that as part of your offering and your niche, if you will.
Yes. So as I was building a business on the fly with no plan, I thought a lot about those different tipping points in-house where somebody would bring me in as a hire, or somebody would say, okay, we're going to build out the team, and what those looked like. And one of the common threads that I saw throughout my career was, since I had worked primarily at SaaS startups or at agencies servicing SaaS startups, a lot of them start investing in organic and content when the paid spend plateaus. So especially in SaaS, a lot of organizations start with paid. It's easy. You can turn the machine on, you can get it up and running, and you can realize really quickly if you have traction. It's really easy to test messaging, and different positioning and things like that. And then they all inevitably hit a place where they've sort of maxed out their paid spend, but they need to grow leads and they need to diversify leads. And that's typically when organic enters the conversation. And so I have really positioned myself as the person who does that, because oftentimes I was that first hire. And so there was nothing. They would just bring me in and say, we need more leads. We need to get them organically. How does it happen? Yes. And so that's still what I'm doing. I am typically that first person who comes in, there's nothing, and I'm building the entire program. So we're doing research, we're figuring out strategy, we're identifying which channels and tactics are actually going to bring them leads, and we're building out that entire infrastructure. And the thing that's really valuable about that, especially if you can do that in the early days, is that you can track it and report on it more effectively. So, a lot of organizations don't even track organic. And that's why everyone's convinced it doesn't work as well as paid. They don't actually know, and how
to.
Yeah, right. And so people will spend all this time in this really detailed tracking and attribution for their paid program and then do absolutely nothing for organic. If you do the same thing for organic, it becomes really easy to tie your contributions to revenue. And we all know as marketers, like it or not, it's not the sexiest part of our jobs, but if you can tie your job to revenue, your job is a little bit more secure and a little more appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit on something that I feel like, as someone in content marketer, whatever your realm is when you fall in content, I feel like this is always an ongoing challenge, not to everyone, but oftentimes to leadership and essentially executive buy-in, is like, where is the ROI? Where is it? What's your kind of, I guess, philosophy or strategy of like, you enter and like things actually aren't bad. Obviously we're going to refine, but like, there's just no tracking. What's your kind of approach if you were to step into that, if you will?
Yes, just starting from scratch. No, most of these orgs have been doing paid, so you can at least look at those early insights from paid and get some idea of what has worked or what hasn't worked. And that can give you some early ideas for what's going to work for organic, right? So I oftentimes start there because a lot of organizations are so skeptical about organic. I also will try to quickly identify a few small wins, even if they are really small. So I oftentimes do that in tandem with sort of my onboarding process and trying to get up to speed on the brand. Like nobody wants to wait 4 weeks for you to roll out a strategy. A great way to build buy-in and to get a little bit of that breathing room is to identify a few of those opportunities and say, hey, we could adjust your sales enablement here and you may close better. Or this landing page needs XYZ and we'll probably convert the traffic more effectively, right? And so sometimes they are having that sort of top of funnel organic traction. They just don't know what to do with it, right? Everyone's just like, well, we have a site, they're just going to find it and they're going to convert, right? And it's like, no, again, you need to be as thoughtful as you are about your paid program. What are you saying on this page? Are you using language that makes sense? Are you addressing their pain points? Like all of those same strategic components still apply in organic. And so I still very much treat organic like a funnel, the way you would paid.
Mhm.
I'm just building out organic funnels.
I love that. And that's something that I actually find fun. It's not just like, here's an article and no, like who doesn't love a good solid article that provides you with, but are also just kind of setting something up that provides people with maybe the resource or the information that they need, that gets them to the next stage, gets them to the next step. And that very well maybe a conversation with someone internally, right? That then leads to, you got a marketing qualified lead, now it's sales qualified, and now it's something else. But it's that ticking point, right? And I feel like it's so easy, or easier displayed from a paid perspective. So people tend to go down that route. But the more like creative and the more tangible long term, the organic is where you need to be. If we're not putting, like you're saying, as much effort on the organic side, then it's, what are we accomplishing? It kind of becomes this thing of like, well, we're never going to reach our goals, because we're not trying to attain them, really, if you
Yes.
will.
And of course, it's not going to perform. There are all these people that are like, well, we put a few memes on the internet and, but content didn't work for us. And it's like, did it not work, or did you just take a really half-baked approach to it?
Yeah. I do. I mean, I'm obviously being very biased here, but I feel like content tends to be, sadly, a very easy scapegoat. But a little bit of a segue. I know a little bit, but I'd love for you to kind of also plug away. You just launched, or are about to launch, your Organic GTM 2.0. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So
And I know this goes a little bit into lead gen, what we were talking about a bit more, but at a different level. I'd love for you to kind of tell us about what it is, what sparked this evolution, and kind of what changed, I guess, in your positioning, and why now.
yes. So I think as marketers, we never, especially if you have your own business, you never invest as much energy into it as you do your clients, because we're doing the paid marketing, right? We're doing marketing we get paid for. And so oftentimes we neglect our business. It's very much like the cobbler's children have no shoes. And I've been doing this for 2.5 years. It was like, okay, I sort of have a viable business. I've had steady clients. I've had some wins. I want to keep this thing going. And so I really spent a lot of time the last 6 months thinking about sustainability and how do I position and market myself so I am the most attractive I can possibly be to my ideal clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially as a solopreneur, I think it's hard because you get stuck in a certain identity. So, I started my career as a freelance blogger. I was a copywriter. I was that girl that always had my nose in a book as a kid. And so for me, starting my marketing career, just getting paid to write was mind blowing. And that was sort of the end goal for a long time, right? And then I became, an editor and a content manager and a head of content. And it was this very linear growth path, but I always thought of myself as the content person, all caps, right? And again, I mean, I know I mentioned this, but there is a lot of misinformation about what content is, especially these days, and especially in the age of AI. And I felt like a lot of the really valuable work I was doing for clients was getting overlooked or just sort of diluted in a lot of these conversations that I was having. And that's on me. I wasn't effectively highlighting the full value of the work that I was doing. And so behind the scenes, I'm doing go to market, and I'm doing all of these lead gen roadmaps, and we're building out pipelines and all of this stuff. But then I'm going on LinkedIn and I'm just talking about like content quality, right? And so it doesn't feel like it's as premium of a conversation. And so I really centered a lot of the updates on the idea that I want to highlight the components of my job that I do most effectively for an organization that really do move the needle in a measurable way. The components of my job that AI would have a hell of a hard time replacing. And again, we as digital marketers have a different perception, but there are people that are just like, well, AI can do it, right? And they may be totally wrong, but we're still constantly fighting against that misperception.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was rooted in that. And so it's really funny, you know, I overhauled my site. I am rolling out these new packages, but to be fully transparent, it's the same work that I've been doing for years. It's the exact same work. And what I did is I changed the language. And I started using language that founders and C-suites and boards use a lot more, rather than the language that we as nerdy digital marketers use when we shop, right?
Yeah.
Yes, because when you're thinking about your audience, they are not as well educated on digital marketing as us, right? And they are thinking broader and they're thinking about those end goals. They're not thinking about something like content quality. They want the performance, and if quality gets them there, great, but they're not going to sit there and nerd out on quality all day the way we are.
They're looking at revenue, they're looking at the numbers,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But we know what goes into that, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So you essentially adjusted your perhaps your content strategy slightly and your brand voice and tone.
Yes, I did. You know, and I do it for clients constantly. And finally I was like, why am I not doing this for myself? You know, I really think this is going to serve me more long term.
I feel like we tend to neglect ourselves.
Yeah.
More so. Unfortunately, it happens.
Yeah. Isabel Stern, follow her on LinkedIn if you're not. She's lovely, but she did a post recently about how it's hard to read the label when you're inside the jar. And what she was referring to is how hard it is to market ourselves, even as marketers, because we're so close to it.
I think many of us can empathize with that, regardless of how active or like whether we're an entrepreneur or not. Like, absolutely. Yes. Just in the networking space, even like, yeah, that one hits. That one hits for sure. I want to jump in a little bit to the hot topic I feel like everyone's talking about, and it's not going to go away. And you already kind of brought it up a little bit, is AI. I'd love to kind of just get your thoughts, I guess, more broadly from an organic perspective. And then I guess we'll see where that takes us because it's pretty in depth. Yeah.
I have so many thoughts. Yes, I mean, on the broadest level, the point I made about the M dashes today, right, is that it's not so much about the M dash. Does the M dash mean they used AI? What people are really concerned about is that they're having a conversation with a robot. Yes. And nobody wants to feel like they're having a conversation with a bot. We already didn't like self-checkout. We already didn't love a chat bot on a website. Like, we knew this going in. And what's mind-boggling to me is that a lot of people seem to want AI to replace all of the most human elements of doing business with each other. And that's the one piece that the robot shouldn't replace, which seems really obvious when you just say human and robot, right? You know, I mean, get the AI to run literally all the rest of your business, which makes sense, you know, and then it frees up your time for you to meet people and build relationships and strengthen trust and have meaningful conversations. And I'm still baffled why so many people are so quick to replace the human component. I think it would be different if we hadn't had COVID. I think there was this long period of isolation. A lot of people let relationships fall to the wayside. You know, we got into this place where we're all working out of our houses and texting and online more and not in person. Yeah. And a lot of people, I think, never got back to the same place of human connection, which is backed up by all the research they've done since then about mental health issues, right? Depression and isolation and anxiety and all of this stuff. But that's just like the last thing that we should use the AI for. It is never going to have the emotional nuance of a human being. It's never going to have empathy for you, real empathy, because it doesn't have lived human experience. You know, I don't care if they, like, have you seen these people that are going online and they're like, I asked ChatGPT to give me a pep talk today? Oh my God.
Jokingly.
Call your best friend, call your mom, get a therapist. Like that.
I'm with you. I think I made a post jokingly of it being like, having a rough day, told chat to give me like, you know, a pep talk, because I also said, by the way, chat it's supposed to like be positive. It's not gonna like
Yeah.
It's not going to say you suck.
Yeah. It's not going to say, hey, Taylor, you know what? I don't know if that's your best choice, which
It's
is
not
what
going to
your
be
best
your best
friend would
friend.
do because
Yeah.
they have all this context about who you are and your history, right?
They understand there's an emotional intelligence. There's a connection that you've had for, it could even be a month, but like years most likely. There's this connection and this human empathy and emotions that can never, it might be like emulated, but it can never be replicated, right? So
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
I recently unfollowed a CEO on LinkedIn because she openly was telling everyone that she fired her executive coach and replaced her executive coach with ChatGPT.
Oh wow. Okay. That's a strong one. I'm like,
That was enough for me. I mean, if you really think that ChatGPT can provide more value than your executive coach, you either need a new executive coach, a different one, because that person is seriously underperforming, or you need to really assess what your values are and what you think you can get out of human relationships.
yeah. I
And
mean,
on the
yeah.
bleakest level, I hate to say this, but I ponder this a lot. Have we reached this place in late stage capitalism where we've been exploiting workers for so long, we've been looking for ways to get technology to do all the things, and we as a society sincerely don't put much value in other human beings and human relationships.
Maybe.
And so for
Maybe.
some people, it really is easy to just replace that component entirely.
AI is so, I mean, at the end of the day, it is so fascinating because there's so many different perspectives and lenses to really like look at it. I don't know. We recently spoke with Lachey Lewis. I don't know how familiar you are with her. She's a thought leader on, pretty prevalent on LinkedIn as well. But her focus has always been on like Bofu. She's like a Bofu content person. She's kind of like having to lean into AI, not for the sake of replacing everything, but from a search engine perspective, because
Yeah.
there's so much data now. I mean, as much as we can gather. And while it hasn't replaced Google, there's like this kind of fear or thought that it might. What I'm curious what your thoughts are on this from an organic and from a content perspective.
I am not going to say that I have circled around to one firm opinion. I've seen so many different data sets of people saying, oh, everyone's using AI and no one's using Google. Then somebody else a couple of days later will have a completely different data set saying, no, look at all this traffic that's going to business sites, right? The reality is no one knows because we are
Yeah.
completely in uncharted territory. I
So
think
new.
the conversations and the opinions to be most wary of are the people who are out there stating something like they know because nobody knows. It's very murky. I do think there is merit in figuring out how you can get AI to recommend you, to quote you, to bring you up in the conversation. Absolutely. Everyone says organic is free marketing. That's free marketing at its finest, especially because AI likes to repeat itself. So
Yeah.
there's a chance where if you somehow float to the top, it's going to float you to the top of God knows how many prompt responses.
Yeah. Do it.
But
So
I don't know that anyone really knows how to accomplish that. I don't know that anyone really knows what the future of SEO looks like. And despite the fact that AI is building in all of these efficiencies and all of these productivity hacks for us, we're already seeing this dissent and this dissatisfaction from people who are having that M dash complaint, for example. People are going to want the human component. And I
yeah.
think that is one of those things that is going to help certain businesses and certain voices rise to the top in the coming years. If you can make it really obvious you are authentic and human and have a unique point of view and are speaking from experience rather than something that the robot fed you, it is going to give you a competitive edge.
Yeah. Absolutely. You kind of hit on this, and I feel like maybe it's a little bit with AI, maybe it's a little post COVID-y. I think we're in a weird space, but I think if you look back, we've always been in weird spaces. It's just like a constant evolution that we all have to navigate, figure out. It's life. But I feel like right now, many many marketers also are struggling with just messaging that reflects their value or their brand's value. If you were to give some advice here, like what advice would you give for senior leaders like refining their own positioning, whether that be, their brand, their agency, their team, their personal brand? What would be your go-to or like initial advice for them?
A couple thoughts here. One, I want to acknowledge that this is substantially harder if you were in-house because you probably work for an organization that is trying to now weave AI this, AI that into all of their marketing materials
Sure.
because they think it's going to make them seem more relevant and current. So I have utmost empathy for the marketers that are trying to navigate that right now. As a piggyback note on that point, I think that we need to make sure that if we are incorporating AI, advertising some sort of AI framework or component of our services, that it actually solves a meaningful problem. Right now, AI is the hammer and everybody is looking around for a nail. There are a lot of people building out really complicated workflows and systems and things in AI that don't really solve for anything that's a problem for most people. You're not going to be able to sell that effectively. So we need to be starting from the place that we all know as marketers we start from, which is what is the problem? And then you reverse engineer solutions from there, right? And so I think if AI is part of the conversation, it needs to be, just like anything else, a meaningful part of the conversation. And it needs to solve a problem for the person that you're trying to talk to or sell to. I think that's not going to go away, especially for people that are in-house. I also do think that the human piece is a competitive edge. So when I am having conversations with clients, I very much make it clear that I am never outsourcing something like strategy creation to AI. I'm not having AI write their content. AI is a crappy writer. It takes me longer to edit AI content than it does to just write something from scratch. I may have AI aggregate data or say I need 5 different sources and subject matter experts that know about XYZ so I can reach out to them, right? Those are the areas where it's very easy to build in efficiencies. But the unique work, the critical thinking, the problem solving, that should be coming from us. And I was doing this before the rebrand, but I oftentimes say 100% human in my marketing materials.
Yeah.
I get unsolicited, very positive responses from people. I have people message me on LinkedIn and say, "Oh, I saw the 100% human, thank God." Right? And like just that is getting someone to connect or reach out and start a conversation. So again, I think, as we're thinking about our brands, we've been talking about personal brands for years. This is not new. Personal is the part that is more important than brand at this point. Right? And so how can you stand out? And in a sea of sameness, if AI is generating a bunch of crap that's out there, our unique perspectives and experiences and approaches are what is going to set us apart. Do you have a methodology no one else has? Do you have IP? Give it a name. And those are things that cannot be replicated by somebody that's doing half-baked work and doing it entirely out of AI.
Yeah. And I might be like touting you and cheering you a little bit, but I have to say, for instance, on some of this that I see on you doing LinkedIn, and I think this is kind of an example of what you're saying is, your personal brand. When you're talking about those pain points or those challenges, it's not surface level. You get deep. The pain point might be like bandwidth, or right, very broad, but you go into why, examples, like empathize at that level. Here's how we can resolve, right? Like it hits deeper. It connects with someone that has experienced just that or experiencing just that, right? Creates a conversation. That's, a part of it. And also just having, some of your posts in general, it might not be directly tied to your offerings per se, but it's tied to you as a personality, who you are, right? So there's a component of that as well. And you feel like both are necessary, correct?
Yes, I do. We're still doing business with people. And there's also ample science around this. I was a social major in college. There's this concept of likability. And likability is actually one of the key components to being able to predict how successful somebody is going to be.
Yeah.
because we as humans still want to like someone, right? It's easier to do business with somebody that we actually enjoy. We think about this a lot if we're bringing in a new hire. Do I want to spend 40 hours a week with this person? It doesn't matter whether that's in the job description or not, right? There's a writer on Medium, his name escapes me, but he has something he calls the 2 beers and a puppy test. And yes, so he won't do business with anyone that doesn't pass this test. And essentially the test is, if I ran into this person, if I was out running errands or something and I ran into this person and they said, hey, do you want to like spend a half hour catching up? Would I want to sincerely sit down with this person and have 2 beers and catch up with them? And if I had a new puppy, would I be comfortable leaving my puppy in their care for 24 hours? And that piece is really not going to change. I mean, even with chatbots on sites and things, like we want to know there's a human on the other end, right? This is why we're fascinated with founders. This is why we love seeing someone build in public. This is why influencers are so popular. Like, we are fascinated with people and with each other. And so no matter how much technological advancement you introduce into the product, the process, the system, whatever it is, we want to know that there's a human being on the other end.
How many times have we been on the phone with customer service or just a doctor's office and it's just a machine, a bot, and you're like, I need to speak to someone. Operator, speak to someone. I need to speak to a human, because what you're trying to relay is not simplistic, like input information. You have a detailed problem you're trying to solve, or you have sensitive information you need to talk about, right? Like, we've all been there, and that's very much, I feel like, is a great example, metaphor, whatever it may be, of kind of that human. At the end of the day, it's like, replace my nurse or my doctor that I'm trying. Absolutely not. Like, that's a great way to kind of look at it. And I say that because I experienced it recently. So anywho, I digress, but I'm curious. Also, I know this, but you also give some amazing hot takes, just in your thought leadership. I'd love to hear what's one hot organic take that you think is currently maybe, like, I don't know, overhyped right now, or maybe one that's underrated.
I mean, it's hard because I feel like so many things are either overhyped or underrated right now. I'm going to sound like Yoda here for a second, but I think that's the point when we're talking about overhyped or underrated. I think that we need to circle back to a place where we normalize not having an opinion on something that we are not an expert on. We over-indexed on thought leadership the past decade, and everyone thinks they need to show up and act like they're the smartest person in the room, and they have all of these brilliant insights, and what they're saying, they treat it like fact rather than just an opinion. And I think the reason, especially on LinkedIn, that the atmosphere is so bad and everyone's saying it's cringy and it feels like it's a robot conversation is partially because there are people that don't know a damn thing about the topic that they are waxing poetic about. And they're showing up like they've got a PhD in the subject. And I think it's infuriating for the people that are subject matter experts. I think it's misleading for the people that aren't experts that are consuming that content. I think it produces an echo chamber because those people are just Googling or using ChatGPT or whatever, because again, they're not speaking from personal experience. So a lot of them are just sort of regurgitating the same half-baked, half-researched stuff. And I think it just makes for a really poor online experience. I originally got into content marketing because I grew up extremely poor, extreme poverty. And I did a lot of work to educate myself. And I loved the idea that you could go online and you could learn anything. You could read books, you could take courses, you could have conversations with people on social media back in the day that you otherwise would never have access to. And it can open up an entire world of possibility. It can open up a career, which is exactly what it did for me. And that really is sort of online content and conversation at its best. And the hippie in me is a little bit devastated that we've reached a place where now it's a lot of crap rather than people sort of showing up excited to share their talents or what they're learning or the things they're most excited about.
Yeah. I can definitely empathize. You know, I came from a journalistic background. I was a journalist. Uh, the times were not kind to us financially. Hence, transition to marketing. I feel like a lot of journalists have transitioned into marketing uh, from a content perspective, obviously. But just to, having experts. And even what's funny is, you have op-eds and people that are very good at providing opinions, but it is an op-ed. And then you have specialists that spend time doing research, and they're an investigative reporter, or they're a sports journalist, or that they're very like, they know their stuff and they spend so much time doing it. And there's this immediate respect, right, of that. And I feel you, where I feel like there's pros and cons, but sometimes it's a bit overload and you have to kind of navigate through the weeds a little bit more to connect with someone. But at the end of the day, I think most of us are smart enough to, I hate that we have to navigate and spend the time, but most of us are smart enough to find the one that speaks to us, because we can tell they're human, we like and can relate to them, they're writing about something that we enjoy, we're really wanting to learn about, you name it. But it's there. I feel like the accessibility to it has become harder. Yes? Or
Yes. Also because there's just so much more crap to wade through, right? I mean, it's harder to find those people. Yeah. We're at a peak point of oversaturation.
I'm curious of your thoughts here, because you definitely sit here. For content leaders at companies, that are in-house most likely, what's your take on, because I've seen a lot of this as of late, what's your take on enabling employees to build their own thought leadership? Do you feel that it helps or hurts the brand? There's a lot of hot takes on this one, but I'd love to hear yours.
I feel like anyone who is setting laws that their employees can't be active on social or can only promote the company are very short-sighted.
Yeah.
This seems like the most extreme version of micromanaging. If you don't trust your people to show up on social media and say something really bright and brilliant, or, say they love working for your brand, or whatever that is, why did you hire them, right? I mean, if you have a trust issue, you have a trust issue, and that goes far beyond social media. And so you either made the wrong hire, or there's a values mismatch, or you already know that person has one foot out the door. But we know this too, again, that personal profiles and leaders are massively outperforming brand accounts. Every major corporate leader has more followers than the brand account. Again, it goes back to that piece where humans like to follow humans. We don't necessarily want to have a conversation with a brand, unless it's one of the fun ones like Wendy's. Like, we absolutely want Wendy's to keep roasting us. I want to put that out in the universe, right? But yes, and especially if your employees are happy, if you've hired great people, if you have a cool product, if they're doing meaningful work, wouldn't you want them to potentially talk about that on social media? Yeah. Wouldn't that be fantastic for your hiring, your retention, your brand affinity, all of those things? So I think it goes back again to people. The issue isn't really whether someone's active on social media or not. The issue really goes back to the leadership, the company values, the level of trust, the level of psychological safety that they're building or not building within their organization. Yeah. And I will say, after being on my own for 2.5 years, one of the best parts of it is being able to say whatever the hell I want on social media. Because there were times in the past where I had to dial it down, or I had to be more conservative, because I knew that my perspective was in conflict with the organization's.
I completely understand that. I think we've all kind of been there, where it's like, I gotta kind of toe the line here a little bit. What would you say to some people that are just like scared in general to like voice their expertise or like thing out there? I feel like a lot of people are just so hesitant to take a step, but they have a lot of great things to say.
Yes, the most brilliant people I know are not active on social media. And that sort of kills me, because everyone needs to be exposed to their brilliance, right? Those are the people that we want to be showing up on social media, and they're usually the ones staying quiet. One, choose yourself. nobody is going to pick you. There are all these people quietly working hard with their heads down and just thinking, if I keep working hard, if I keep doing good stuff, like someone's going to notice me. I'm going to get an opportunity. I'm going to get a promotion. I'm going to get that dream job. That is not how that works. Like humans are very preoccupied with ourselves. There's a million distractions out there. No one is just going to magically notice you. And so if you really want certain things for yourself and you know that, the best thing that you can do is show up and advocate for yourself. Do not wait for anybody else to do it. And it doesn't mean that you have to be salesy. It doesn't mean that you have to be pushy, but there is nothing wrong with sharing something you're proud of, or sharing something interesting you learned that may help somebody else, or, just having a conversation with someone who seems really fascinating to you. There is nothing wrong with that. You see these influencers and celebrities getting trolled and stuff, and you think you're going to show up online and everyone's going to be mean to you. And you need to reach a really high caliber of following and influence for that to happen. I've got, I think, just under 7,000 followers on LinkedIn. I'm not getting trolled. Like people aren't telling me off in the comments. I'm sure there's people that disagree with my very opinionated hot takes, but they just scroll on by, And so, like, yes, that atmosphere is out there, but I think for 99.9% of people, they're never going to have that experience on social media because, frankly, they're not famous enough to have that experience on social media.
Yeah. I think there's also a fear of like, I won't get any likes. And I can personally say this because I took a leap of faith too. And I have less than you, that's for sure, in following, but I'm still active. And I feel like if I have something to say, I say it. And one post might get 100 likes and one post might get 5. But that doesn't mean that the post that got 5 isn't speaking to someone, right? Like, yeah. I think there's a little bit of fear in that too, where maybe that's a little bit of our society, which is wild to think about, but I think it's a little bit of that, social like validation. Like, I'm not going to get that, so I'm gonna refrain, or I'm gonna delete this post. When it's like,
that's heartbreaking. So feedback is great, yes. I'm going to use my own business as an example. So LinkedIn is my number one pipeline for my business. I get most of my leads and clients from LinkedIn. Every single client who has reached out to me on LinkedIn never interacted with a post prior. They were lurking for months. They were reading content, but like I hadn't seen a like, I hadn't gotten a comment. And then at some point, somebody just slides into my inbox and is like, love your stuff. Like, we need help with marketing. Let's talk. This happens time and time and time again. And so you never know who's lurking, one, but it doesn't mean that somebody isn't scrolling and going like, oh, that was insightful, or that's interesting, right? The same way that you're hesitant to show up, other people are hesitant to click, or they get distracted, or they're just passive. They're sort of passively consuming rather than engaging. The other thing is too, is marketers, like you're getting the reps in. So maybe that post only got 5 likes, but you're showing up. You have to be introspective. You have to articulate your thoughts. You're being consistent and showing up online, right? And all of that stuff is going to help you over the long term. So it's just like working out. You don't see results the first day in the gym. You don't see results most days in the gym, right? But you stick with it, and over the long term, then you see those gains. That's based on the consistency. And it's the same thing with your content. Also, I say this too, they can't all be bangers. Like some of the posts are just gonna bomb.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Like, I know we're definitely at getting close to time here. I'm curious if you have some time for a little like rapid fire questions I have for you, or what's one marketing buzzword you'd love to ban forever?
Just one?
Eeny meeny.
Just one? I don't know. Next question. Go.
Best snack for a long content strategy session?
Oh, gummy bears.
I'm with you. That's what's something that you've changed your mind about just in the past day or two?
Like I said, not having an opinion on everything. We don't need to show up as an expert all the time. There are a million other ways to show up. You can show up as a student. You can show up as a journalist. You can show up as, sort of a thoughtful question asker. There are so many other ways to show up other than just being an expert all the time.
I love that. I think that's a great takeaway. That's a great place to pin it.
Good. Yeah. since I panicked on that first question.
Oh, you're good. It's going to come back to you. And when it does, when you have that one buzzword, please let me know.
I'm gonna message it to you later today. I will go on LinkedIn and I will be enraged by a word and I will send you a message, Taylor.
I can't wait. Mine right now might be M dash.
Oh,
I don't know why. I'm like triggered. But anywho, it was an absolute pleasure, Melissa. I appreciate you coming on, just talking shop, talking in general. Where can people find you if they're not following you already?
absolutely, LinkedIn. I am active there every day, probably to a fault. You can find my website at Organic GTM. And I am going to start writing on Medium again here very soon. So if you want some longer form content, you can follow me there.
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We love passing the mic to you, Melissa, and we'll let you go.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Big thanks to Melissa for joining us on the mic. If you haven't already, check her out on LinkedIn. She drops insight bombs daily. And if you're looking for support building content that's just as strategic as it is human, hit us up at ClearVoice. Until next time, keep the conversation going.